Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening wherever you are, and thank you for tuning in to Sensational She-Geek live from Yancy Street. This is my second official podcast episode, the third if you're going to actually count them all. I did a first episode last Friday like I am today, and I did a second episode this past Monday going over WandaVision, Wonder Woman 1984, and some of the spotlights of representation that I wanted to talk about for this week's comics. In this episode, I will mainly be talking about what I read from this week's comics and maybe a little bit of what's coming out next week that I am looking forward to. For Future State this week, the only issue that I'm actually going to be talking about is Aquaman. I did read Dark Detective, however, Aquaman is really the one that stood out for me this week. I'm also going to be reviewing We Only Find Them When They're Dead, number 5, Excalibur, but only really talking about certain aspects of it, Captain Marvel, number 25, Batman Black and White, but there are two stories in that anthology book that I'm going to talk about. That was the Batman Black and White number 2, The Eighth Immortal number 1, and another indie number 1, Stake number 1. So I'll be talking about those issues and possibly some more in this discussion podcast. I'm going to go ahead and start with Future State Aquaman number 1. This was an issue that I was really looking forward to. I talked about it a lot on my 1.5 episode on Monday. It was really, not really what I expected, but I think the biggest flaw that it suffered from is what all of the Future State books seem to be suffering from, is that they were meant to be something bigger than what we've turned out to be. It's this 2-issue to 4-issue thing. It was meant to be a lot more. Depending on who you talk to, the certainty of this is kind of wafting and waning, but Future State was probably meant to be that 5G reboot DC was supposedly planning, and they just kind of pushed out, to be honest, and now they've just done it as a little mini event for these 2 months of 2021. But what it seems that most of the characters, such as Andy Curry and Jackson Hyde, and of course Yara Flor's Wonder Woman, the list goes on, all these characters people have really taken to, they've attached themselves to, I think, really quickly, and the characters are a success, far more than DC predicted, and far more than most new DC characters of the past while, probably decades you could say, and they've taken off. And so I think the biggest disappointment of any of these Future State books is that they're so short. You get 2 to 4 issues, that's it. I think Future State really would have benefited from allowing these books to extend longer than just the 2 issues to 4 issues per series. But this Aquaman one was a lot of fun. It's kind of hard to tell the time the time that passes through the issue. You start it with, you get Jackson Hyde as a new Aquaman, you get Andy Curry as Aqualass, who is furious that anybody calls her Aqualass. She is Aquawoman, and don't you dare call her anything else. She's a teenager, what can I say? The characterization, actually, of teenage Andy Curry was really well done. It seems that her father and mother just left the surface to go rule Atlantis together, and they've left Jackson Hyde behind to A, watch over Andy, and B, be the new Aquaman. So she has 2 reasons there to kind of hold stuff against him in a bitter, childish, albeit way. Is that she wants her father to be here taking care of her. She probably wants her father to be the best Aquaman there ever was. So now that there's a younger, newer Aquaman, it's competition in her head, and she is angry that he could potentially be as good of an Aquaman as her father. And if he's not, she's going to be angry that he's not, because then he's just not good enough. So it's hard for Jackson to kind of win that for her. But it starts off with a boating accident. It seems that Black Manta has escaped. It's kind of a loose start, but you go immediately into an argument between Andy and Jackson underwater. And Andy accidentally uses her powers on the sea life around her and is immediately ashamed. And you find out she's ashamed because her powers, to her at least, I'm not sure if this is legitimate or if this is just how she feels about it, her powers are not the same as her father's. While her father, Arthur Curry, Aquaman, the original Aquaman, does talk to fish and they can do what he wants them to do, Andy feels that her powers are more of controlling them against their will, less communication. So whenever she accidentally uses her power, like when she goes off on Jackson in the water here and accidentally draws in the fish around her, she's ashamed because she feels like she's made them do something they don't want to do. But there's more to her power set as we get later into this. Directly after this, basically Andy and Jackson kind of accidentally swim into the conflux. The conflux is basically the spatial ocean that connects all bodies of water across the universe. They had a couple different ways of depicting it, which was really cool, all of them. One image was a big spread of what looks like just a really thick galaxy, but it was what they're trying to show is the conflux there in space, different colors and tones of water, just kind of there in the universe. And it's really cool. And then going through it, swimming through it, they swim through different tones of water based on where they're at in the universe and which planet they're on and etc. But they can just keep swimming and just go from one to the other to the next, and it's a really cool idea. And Jackson is retelling the story, and he's saying that they did this for so often. They didn't really realize, though, that there was something that went through the conflux as well to protect it. And so then, of course, that eventually it's a sea monster. It eventually comes up and attacks them, and we see Andy accidentally use her powers a second time, but this is a different power set. It seems that this power set is water blades, let's say. She seems to be able to take water or possibly aqua-type power and make it sharp. And as she and Jackson are losing their battle with this sea monster, she is distraught, and in her pain and her fear and her anger and her anxiety, she lashes out at the creature, trying to free herself, and in the process cuts off her own leg. And that's kind of where that story ends. Not where the issue ends, because all of this, I didn't really quite start correctly, all of this is being told from Jackson to this mysterious ruler of a water planet, where he is being held, I guess, as a prisoner. It's been an unknown amount of times that he's been there, but it seems that he's here because of the events that happened in the conflicts with Andy. Andy, disappears, whatever it is that happens with her. Jackson is taken, and he's been there since then. It's hard to tell how long it's been. He does have a bit of a beard, and his hair is a bit longer, although he had it tied up before, so it's hard to say. But he looks, I would say, physically more mature. He looks like an older man to me, but I guess it's probably only been maximum a couple of months. But the reason that he's telling the story to the ruler after being there for so long, without having told them any of this background for himself, is because he got a message that morning. In his attempt to escape, he stopped his escape and returned willingly to his prison, I guess, whatever kind of dungeon it is that they keep him in. And now he reveals why. He says this whole time that he's been there, however long that it's been, he's been only showing them the amount of power that he wants them to see. They have been reacting to him based on the amount of power that he shows them he has. And now that he has something, which he saw that morning in his attempted escape, now that he has something to drive him, he lashes out and frees himself for good. And the thing that we see that is driving him forward and to escape and to keep fighting for life and to get back home was a message in the water made of bioluminescent sea creatures saying, "Aqua Woman lives." So Andy Curry is out there in the conflux somewhere, aware that Jackson has been taken by this, royal whatever ocean guy, and she's coming for him. And so Jackson, now knowing that, he has taken his moment and he is lashed out and he is breaking out as well, and hoping that Aquaman will be there to save him. And that's how the issue ends. It's not actually a whole lot of Andy Curry in it, since the majority of the story is told from Jackson's perspective about how he kind of ended up there, starting from a very brief time before they wound up in the conflicts. It's not a whole lot of background, but the interaction between the two of them that you do briefly have is definitely enough to set up a relationship and a status quo for going forward. So for the second issue, the cover has them as much older than we saw them in this first one. So I'm curious if they're going to say how much time it is that's passed, and how long it was that either Andy was missing, Jackson was missing, or how long they were separated. It's kind of all up in the air. We're not really sure the time discrepancies in all of this, but I'm excited to see how old Andy is when she pops back up here, what she's been up to, if it's been a long time, or if it hasn't been a long time, what the heck happened with her leg, because I'm pretty sure in Justice League, when we saw her several weeks ago, she had 2 legs. So it's possible one of them was bionic, and I didn't know that, but we'll see, I guess, in the second issue of this, or potentially in a next Justice League issue. I really enjoyed Future State Aquaman #1. Once again, it was not quite as long as I wanted it to be, but we'll see if the second issue kind of wraps it up, and afterwards if we'll get more of them. I'm really, really hoping we'll get more Jackson and Andy. They seem to be a great team. They seem to have a really good dynamic being built up. And if Andy's going to become Aquawoman for the Justice League, that would, I assume, mean that there is no Aquaman, or possibly he's just not on the Justice League. But I would like to see what that kind of, what this scene kind of ends up bringing their relationship into being in the second issue and on. Next, I want to talk about We Only Find Them When They're Dead. It's by Al Ewing and Simone DeMeo. Simone DeMeo has some of the most fantastic art for spacescapes. It's absolutely perfect. I think you could probably compare what he does artistically to the cliche joke about J.J. Abrams' lens flares, because he does have a lot of that stuff, but it fits so perfectly in space because it's space, and it's glass and metal and shiny and high technology. This issue number 5 is the last issue of this first book, as they're calling it. I imagine issue 6 will pick up a second book, kind of a similar way as The Last God over at DC Black Label. And this issue, I'm not really sure if you could say this answers questions about any of the gods, or just brings them up more, brings up further questions. It does answer questions about some of the backstory of the characters, though, so we'll go into that here. Paula, of course, is the, let's call her, police officer of space, who is just really not, she does not like Captain Malik. Malik being the main character, who's trying to find, with his crew of 3, one of whom has just died, he's trying to find a living god, because all the gods they find are dead, and he wants to know where the hell these guys come from. Because he's a curious guy, he's from space, what can you say? We're curious people. So, we get the backstory of why Paula has this bone to pick with Malik so much, why she is so ready to kill him as soon as she can. And basically what happened back in the day, some years ago, was when Malik was a young man, Paula was in love with his brother. They were actually planning on getting married, but Malik and his family were having severe financial problems, partially due to new laws and new levels of intensity in the, in having to get your gear checked before they leave the gods and the whole farming thing that they do, if that makes sense. They're trying to find a way to get away with stuff, basically. So they're hoping that Paula, now kind of, you know, being part of the family, she will kind of just look the other way and let them do illegal things. And it kind of, they go out there, it was supposed to be Malik on the ship, but he switches it out with his brother, so that the brother's out there, she won't want to hurt them or shoot their ship down, because it's your husband/fiance. Of course, it all goes very poorly. Paula does not attack them. She does hold back, but unfortunately the ship does crash and explodes anyway. It's unfortunate, and she blames Malik for the death of her future husband, even to this day, because he switched himself out with his brother, who she loved. So then you jump back to where we currently are in the series, which is Malik and Paula on top of the recently murdered I want to say titans. They're gods, they're titans, whatever you want to call them. We'll go both ways, god or titan. They're standing on top of the body that was just accidentally killed by the remainder of Malik's crew, which was a thing. That was quite a frustration to read in the 4th issue. But basically their talk is just her letting loose all of this crap that she's held back, that she's felt for him for this long, and him just saying, listen, it wasn't anybody's fault. And it all kind of winds down to Paula dying. Out of the blue, she stands there and she stands up straight and she looks at him and she says, this was always going to happen, and a tiny little seed of an asteroid shoots through her whole head, killing her instantly. Malik thinks to himself about how she had warned him about that at one point in life, and wonders if she was aware that that was something that could be a very big possibility while they stand out there. So now Paula's dead, the god is dead, Malik gets back into his shuttle, and he just kind of takes off. The journey that they started was kind of presumed over because all of their supplies had to be purged and half their crew is gone, more or less. So what they came out here to do is sort of been moot. So Malik just takes off. He's angry, he takes off, and we start hearing the tolls. The 8 tolls are what happens whenever there is a dead god that arrives for the ships to come and harvest. So he starts hearing these tolls. Now remember, he's further out than any person has ever been. He hears the tolls happen, and instead of the body of a dead god just arriving, he sees 2 rows standing across from each other of living gods tunneling, taking the body of their deceased friend slash brother, unknown, and pushing him into our universe. What? It was really cool. This was not even the end of the issue, keep in mind, but I just gotta go over this for a second. I don't read this book for the plot. The plot's good. The plot's fine enough. I don't read this book for the plot. This is like, you know, the Godzilla movies. This is like, you know, Kong movies we've had recently. They're doing Godzilla Kong now, which is gonna be awesome. Nobody goes to those movies for the plot, okay? Nobody goes to those movies for the plot. We go to those movies so that we can see really just fucking awesome monster fights, okay? That is why I read We Only Find Them When They're Dead. For these crazy, intense, sci-fi, gigantic Titan god things, I want to know what they are. I want to see them doing all kinds of shit. I can't wait for more of that to happen. And we don't have to wait that long, because in this, like, afterward, I guess you could say, that happens after Malik witnesses this crazy shit, it's the gathering of the other ships back where they're supposed to be, where they usually are. They're gathering around, they're talking to each other about how, oh, there hasn't been a Titan here in so long because something's messed up, blah blah blah, maybe it's over. So the tolling happens, and at the 8th toll, instead of this time a dead god arriving, or even a row of living gods, they get the biggest god they have ever seen, shows up in front of them, screaming in a terror rage, and swiping them out of the spatial skies. Just absolutely furious, and that's how the issue ends. That's how book, I guess, 1 ends, of We Only Find Them When They're Dead. To reiterate, that shit's cool. I am all for crazy big monsters. It's something that I love in Star Wars, is the crazy big, ridiculous Star Wars monsters. I love Godzilla and Kong because they're just some stupid big sci-fi monsters. This just goes so well along with all of that. That's why I like this stuff, and that's why Al Ewing, while I normally don't like his writing, he's got me on this one. I'm excited to see what happens, if Malik is going to end up on the god side of the portal, or if he's going to stay on this side with the dead god, or if they're going to see him or what. I have to assume that the god who showed up at the very end swiping the other autopsy ships around space in his angry fury, I have to assume that he is some kind of king of the gods or something, who has showed up furious of the death of the last one. Remember, in issue 4, Malik's crew accidentally killed the only living god they had ever seen. I have to assume this king has shown up furious over her death. It's possible that maybe the Titan gods are trying something the way that Malik is trying something. They're trying to cross this divide. Who knows? It's just it's so much more has been now brought to the surface for us to kind of poke around with and ask questions with. There really aren't very many questions that have been answered. It's just continues being this snowball of what? And I love it. I can't say anything else except for that I love it. Moving on to the X-Men side of things, at Marvel, the issue for X-Men stuff that I wanted to talk about today, it is Reign of X, and I want to talk about Excalibur. The reason I want to talk about Excalibur is the Betsy Quanon situation, I'll just say. As many fans of X stuff know, well, let's start that over. As many fans of comics / media, entertainment media know, there's this idea of body swapping that happens all the time. It's comedies and dramas and everything in between. And body swapping happens a lot at Marvel Comics. The most famous case, most definitely, would be Quanon and Betsy Braddock. Quanon being Revanche, the Asian ninja-style fighter who was trained by the Hand, I believe, and Betsy Braddock being the current Captain Britain, who was, oh gosh, she's gone by a few names in the past, but she was, technically, Psylocke was her name, her hero name. Through the years, they've really been kind of one person mishmashed one way or the other. One, you know, sometimes more Kwannon, sometimes more Betsy, sometimes in one body, sometimes in the other. It's really been a mess for decades, and they finally, Jonathan Hickman, with this Dawn of X, now we're in Reign of X, but with the start of Dawn of X, he finally gave them both their own bodies. Hallelujah! But there's problems still. There's been at least one interaction that I can remember between Kwannon and Betsy around a fireplace early on in Dawn of X. And Betsy approaches her wanting to speak with her. Betsy basically rode her flesh around while she stayed inside her head, unable to control her own body or her life. Betsy rode her skin around for years. There is some bad blood in here, and based on Kwannon's reaction to telling Betsy not to come anywhere near her, the bad blood did not wash away with this Krakoan rebirth that they both were able to have. There are some serious deep scars that are going to have to be addressed, and we kind of start to get to see that in this week's Excalibur 17. This week we get to see what Betsy Braddock, the Captain Britain of our Earth, has been up to. I should say the 616 Earth, it's not our Earth. She, of course, quote, died, unquote, during X of Swords, which was really just a trick from Saturnin trying to save her brother because she was in love with him, but it ended up being Betsy, and the plan didn't quite go the way she wanted. So it turns out that Betsy Braddock is on another world, in another realm, however you want to say that. It's a realm where she, Betsy Braddock, is a queen of England, and also a mutant. And England is a little bit like Krakoa, where I guess Krakoa was a thing in that realm, but England is now like the modern Krakoa, where if you're a mutant, England is the place that you go to live, to be safe, and to have a government that protects you. So I guess what happened when Betsy woke up in this realm was she actually woke up in Queen Betsy's body. So there's no two bodies happening here, it's just her in the wrong Betsy body in the wrong universe. So she gets some help, gets Warren Worthington to help her. Her idea is, if I'm going to get back to my Earth, I gotta go to the lighthouse, because the lighthouse is the big connector to the other world in our world, so it's got to be the connector to the other world in this world, and therefore I can connect with it and get back to my world and my body and everything that's supposed to be the way that it's supposed to be. So, to do that, to get to the lighthouse, which in this world is some high-tech government secret facility, she gets the help from, this world's Kwannon. And by this world, I mean the false reality she's in is Kwannon. Okay, gotcha? Okay. A really cool interaction. Kwannon, as it turns out, of this realm, has no similar experiences in terms of Betsy, the way of Betsy's Kwannon. They did not share bodies. She confirms it with her at one point. Nobody else ever lived in her body, and she never lived in anybody else's body. So it seems that bad history just kind of never happened. Which was interesting, seeing Betsy's reaction to seeing this Kwannon who hadn't been tainted by the lack of controlling her own body and things like that, you know? Her shock at seeing what would be of Kwannon if she hadn't gotten into her life, I guess you could say it too. But it's really fun. I have a theory that I kind of spun out of that. What if at some point in the future of Excalibur, another issue, this second reality's Betsy, the queen, ends up having to be forced into a scenario where she body swaps with Kwannon or rides in her skin bag, you know, the way that Betsy did back on 616. Something like that, which then our Betsy, Captain Britain, has to go and save the situation, hash it out with them, which would trigger then her having to hash it out with the actual Kwannon. I hope that all makes sense. There's so many different realities and dual people of the same name. I just really like that Hickman is starting this little trickle of seeds for the Betsy Kwannon situation. Everybody is just sitting here waiting for the two of them to hash it out. It's not going to be pretty, but when it's over, it's going to be great. And one of many things that I think Hickman has in his very, very broad plan for the X-Men in general, it's one of the things that I think is on his long-term list of things that are going to get worked out that haven't been worked out in a really long time. And I'm happy to see that turning out the way that it should be. I also kind of want to talk briefly about Captain Marvel 25. This is, of course, the timeline still, the story arc of Carol Danvers having been shot forth into the future. It's the same future that we saw in Captain Marvel The End, where an aging Carol returns to a destroyed Earth to help them save what's left of Earth, and then goes and repowers the sun and sacrifices herself by flying into the sun and becoming binary in the sun, so therefore she basically is the sun. So this current story arc is the modern Carol, who has been kicked forward for an unknown reason, as yet unknown reason, into the future several months after that happened with her old self in Captain Marvel The End. She has the same cast of characters, we meet new characters, there's new villains. It's been a really fun story arc, I think, but I'm looking forward to it being over, not because it's boring or anything, but because I know what we're getting next is gonna be just awesome, and I'm honestly excited to see how this ends. There's so many different ways that I can think of this going. I'm really honestly curious to see how Kelly Thompson is gonna wrap it up. But where we're at right now in the story was Carol was taken hostage, a lot of her people were taken hostage. They had Rhodes, who is James Rhodes' daughter, of course, who is not the daughter of Carol, which has caused slight issues in Carol's emotions, of course. And then we have, of course, Bridget, who we don't know who her mother is yet, but her father is Thor. So we have to assume that one of, or at least one of the 3 granddaughters of Thor that we see in King Thor must be her daughter. But we don't know who her mother is yet, and that's where we get my theory. My theory is her mother is Carol. I don't really have very many reasons to back that up, except that it would be out of the blue and surprising. And she's blonde. That's a terrible reason, honestly. There's a lot of blondes in the Marvel Universe. But yeah, it'd be really cool. I think that she'd be cool if it was Carol. My other guesses would obviously be characters like Jane Foster or any of the Valkyries, really. Would be the kind of more obvious ones. Or maybe it's Enchantress too. Who knows? We'll find out. I think Enchantress would have mentioned that in this issue, which she didn't. So what actually, speaking of Enchantress, the situation with her is that she, of course, ended up having this affair with Namor because her reasons were really funny, honestly, and I can see how this would happen because they were both really powerful, hot people. I can see how that ended up being the two of them shacking up because they're just that attractive and that powerful that they were just like, yeah, let's do it. And so they have this kid Ove, and Ove kills Namor, and she runs away with Ove, so the people don't kill him for having killed their king, and that's how they ended up on the surface, and that's how he ends up with this, like, surface kingdom that he's got going on. And he's got magic under his control, under Enchantress's control, his mother, and things really aren't looking good for Carol and her friends. But then we get Rhodes breaks out Bridget breaks out Carol, we get Emma dies. I'm pretty sure Emma Frost died in this issue, man. Nothing's been confirmed, but she had said to Carol in previous issues that if she would ever go out of her diamond form, she would die, and that's why she can't do the telepathy at this point, because she's in her diamond form and she can't do that. So to break Luke Cage out of his spell that he's under, she breaks out of her diamond form, does the telepathy thing, and collapses on the ground. So my assumption is that Emma sacrificed herself, which is quite the arc for a character like Emma Frost. And really, she's been at that point for a long time, that I think that would be something realistic for her character to do, that she's come a long way. So she sacrifices herself, Carol gets out and gets blasted by Bridget and the hammer. She finally got Mjolnir to come back to her after the several issues of Mjolnir refusing to come. When she calls, Mjolnir finally shows up. She's got the whole Thor outfit on. It looks awesome, and she blasts Carol, powering her up to the point of binary, and we get our first variant of the binary outfit. It's a little bit similar. It's two-toned. Technically, you get black and flame tones. Her hair is flames. She had the flamey eyebrows. She had a big flaming hollow star on her chest, and then the flames going up her legs, kind of in the way that the old white binary suit had the flames going up the legs as well. So that was really, really exciting for me to see. I'm a big fan of Carol's binary period. It's one of the less known times during her herodom. But I really enjoy looking through her time with the X-Men and with all the other teams and things that she kind of hops around with during that era. So if she's binary for this issue or the next one, awesome! It probably won't last very long because we know that after the end of the next issue, she's gonna be on Earth, so we don't have too much longer here. And we also know, based on solicitations going forward for future issues, that Carol does not defeat Ove, which is another thing that I'm really honestly excited to see. What does that mean? Does she just end up going back in time? Does she get sucked back the way she got pulled forward and just doesn't have a chance to stop it? Or is it something where she fights him and just can't destroy him or can't stop him that way? I imagine it's something magical, though, because we then after the issue after this, we get Carol's getting a new suit and she's going after the one thing superpowered characters have a hard time managing: magic. Not the character, the stuff. Carol will apparently be practicing magic in a couple of issues, and that's really exciting. She's gonna get a new suit. Again, I really like how many suit designs Kelly Thompson has been putting out there, and I low-key think it's because she knows how many Deadpools they've been making for Marvel Legends, and she wants Carol to get in on that shit, and I do too. Hasbro, if you're listening, if you could please make several variants of Carol Danvers figures, you're so behind on that. There's so many waiting to be done, and there's so many. Anyway, this issue was highly enjoyable. I am really excited to see what happens in the next one, and how this kind of turns out poorly based on everything we've seen. Then after that, we'll have a filler issue, and then the issue of Carol deciding that she needs to be anti-magic, or at least be able to do something with magic. She's like Superman, you know? Carol Danvers and Superman have the same weakness, not kryptonite, magic. They just can't do anything with it. It's just, that's, nah. So that'll be nice. That'll be something that has been ingrained in her character for a while, that they are actually changing. Supposedly, we'll see what happens. So that'll be really fun. And also, while you're here, if you are not a fan of King in Black, or if you're tired of all the King in Black tie-ins, Captain Marvel and Amazing Spider-Man are the only two ongoing series, as far as I can find, that do not have anything related to King in Black going on in their books. So go ahead and read those if you're looking for a reprise from these wannabe badass dude stories. Batman Black and White #2 was also an issue that came out this week. It's an anthology series. And this month's issue had two stories that I really, really enjoyed, and so I want to talk about both of them. They were the A and B story. The A story was Tom King and Mitch Gerrits, and the B story was Sophie Campbell by herself. So we'll go ahead and talk about the Tom King story. If you are familiar with Tom King's Batman, you are familiar with the fact that he likes to make us hurt. Tom King is really good at writing things that will make you sit back and kind of tear up a little bit. So this issue starts with the outside view of a church collapsing in a fire, and the priest runs inside trying to save the children, but he gets caught himself at the bottom of the mess of rubble. So Batman arrives trying to help the priest get out. The priest can barely communicate with him where he even is, and Batman is searching through this incredible mess trying to find where he is so he can help him. And as he's searching, you get the gut punch, which is, the priest ran into the building to save the children. Batman tells him as he searches, he had already saved the children. When he saw the building was collapsing, he had already done that. The priest ran in to save no one. And so in the sense, this scenario that he finds himself in now was pointless. But at the same time, that's not the point of view the priest has. The priest just over and over again reiterates, the children are okay, I only care about the children. And as Batman gets to his side, he sees that it's too late. He can't save this man at this location, and he can't get him to another location in time to save him. There is nothing he can do. The priest is going to die. And so he tells him this news, and he takes his cowl off fully in front of the dying man and rubs his eyes while his tears fall down his face. And the priest is asking him, you know, what's wrong? What can I do? Are you so upset? And he tells him, I couldn't do it. I couldn't save you. I got all the kids, but I couldn't save everyone. I feel terrible. I'm upset. I'm mad at myself. And the priest looks at him and silences his apologies and tells him, sometimes making it to the end isn't what matters. Just being here is what matters. Just being here by your side in this moment is enough. Whew. That was a tearjerker. Thanks, Tom King. Fuck you. The issue goes on, of course, for a few more pages of dialogue, and the priest speaks with him about a certain Bible verse, a certain biblical tale that he had never really understood correctly, and as he sits here, he tells the tale to Batman, and to Bruce, as he sits in front of him now, and he explains to him the way he had understood the story previously, and now the way that he understands it today, as he's sitting here dying. The story had to do with a man being called home to God from death, through death, and his discussions with God thereafter. You'll have to read the story to get a decent idea of the priest's parable that he tells Bruce, but you can definitely get a sense that Bruce having taken off his cowl in front of the priest was 100% him using this moment as a confessional, lifting the weight, whatever weight he could, in that moment of horrible truth that he was too late to save this man. And so, the man dies there, of course, but what I think really stood out to me a lot about this scenario that Bruce found himself in is he relates to the priest in a way. He's always respected priests, and I kind of understand why. It's looking through the Bible verses, translating them into a sense beyond just literally foreign language into English. He translates them into a sense that is understandable, and in that way, while Bruce is a detective of life and death, the priests that he sees, they are detectives of the immortal soul, which is something that Bruce knows is far beyond his understanding and his comprehension. And so he respects these leaders of the church who do this searching for clarity of morality and the soul. Of course, it's a very dark Tom King story. It's very scratchy, Mitch Gera's art, the way that it is, but it's absolutely gorgeous, and I completely recommend it to anybody. It's got a little bit of Tom King's ideas on religion, I think, which is basically what Batman's ideas of religion, if I was to translate that correctly. On a lighter note, Batman Black and White, the B story was by Sophie Campbell. Her art style is absolutely perfect for the Batman animated series style art she did for this story. She is known particularly for Gem and the Hologram, so it's very cartoony style. And there's no dialogue in this story. It's just a couple of pages of action, and it's really, really fun and really, really sweet. It's Catwoman. She's on a heist in snowy Gotham City. She's in her black suit, and she's about to escape, but Batman arrives on the scene. He catches her, and he spoils her fun by taking back the gems, and she's sitting there pouting in the snow, and she notices next to her this little dainty white cat. You can only see its eyes and its paws, and the little claws. And so she sits there and looks at it, and she gets an idea. So she goes back home, I guess, and goes to work, sewing and cutting and doing all kinds of stuff. And she comes out, and she's in a Catwoman suit, but it's fully white, winter edition. So now she goes out and she does some heists, she does her stuff, she gets some loot, and Batman shows up knowing that she's out here doing something she shouldn't be, and he comes looking for her, but he can't see her blending into the snow right in front of him, and she smiles, and the last moment she pounces at him, surprising him with a kiss. And that's it. It's just a cute little story. It's several pages of dialogueless cartoony drawings. But it's heartfelt, and it's clever, and I think it's really fun, and I'd love to see more stories like this at Cape Comics. And I understand why they put it after the Tom King Mitch Gera series, because by the time you finish that, you're like, your soul is in your throat, and you're choking up a little bit, so then they have to give you this fun, lighthearted, happy story about Batman and Catwoman playing in the snow. The last books I want to talk about here are two indie #1s. It is Stake #1 and Eighth Immortal #1. What's interesting about these two issues, while they're incredibly different in style for so many reasons, they're both in black and white, more or less. You get, with Stake, you get a kind of Joelle Jones style, thick, liquid-like inking with you get highlights of color in blood, in characters' eyes, in highlights to accentuate people in the background and whatnot. And similarly, in the Eighth Immortal, you get more of a watercolor Peach Momoko style art. It's definitely along the lines of something manga-esque. It's easily the most manga-adjacent art style I've seen in a comic, probably ever. But again, it's black and white, or grayscale would probably be more accurate to this one. And you just have the color bits in the eyes, in the, you know, bits of blood, in hair, in hems of dresses, just tiny little details, the light shining on someone's skin, you know. It's really nice. The two of them, I have to admit, I did prefer the Eighth Immortal better. Just to go over Stake quickly, it's a story of Stake, who is a vampire hunter, and she goes around hunting vampires in this world where vampires are real and they're not any kind of curse or thing from hell. They're just like, you know, there's spiders and there's flies, and the flies get eaten by the spiders. We are the flies to the vampires' spiders, if that makes sense. That's just the way this world is. They were living in the shadows for most of eternity, and I guess it's in the past short amount of time. I'm not sure actually how long it's been, but in the recent past, they have come out as being real things, and have kind of taken over a lot of stuff. As we see, just Stake is out searching for vampires who take advantage of people. The ones that she found in this issue were EMTs that were fully ready to drain her, and she gets saved by her vampire friend Jessamy, who, I guess there is a Kickstarter one-shot out there somewhere called Stake Presents a Jessamy, which came out before this. It's a really intriguing story, but honestly, I like the art more than anything. And then Eighth Immortal, which I prefer a little bit. Again, the art is so much like a manga comic. I kind of want to look into the artists and see if they have a history in that, because it is so similar. Again, accentuating just details in the grayscale inks with slight watercolor highlights, making it just a beautiful comic to read. The story is about... Well, it starts with a character called Denise, who apparently isn't actually a character in the series. We're introduced to Denise as a young girl who just got her period for the first time while she's on a day out at the mall with her friends. And through her, we meet Kurapan, who is... It is her eternal chore to remove the immortality from pillins. They're called P-I-L-L-A-I-N-S, pillins, like Denise. They were born with the potential for immortality, and when they reach, I guess you would say, physical maturity, that gene triggers, and so the nectar of the eternal blossom starts flowing in their veins, and that is what Kurapan shows up and removes from them. They have no memory of the incident, but they will never have the immortality that she denies them. And that's Kurapan's life. It is her eternal chore. She does it across the world for thousands of years. We're not really sure why. We just know that that's because there is a rule that there is only 7 immortals and there should never be an 8th. Kurapan is married. Her husband is also immortal. They do not get intimate ever. He actually has affairs with other women who are above childbirthing age, strictly because they do not want to accidentally create a new immortal. So they don't have sex with each other, and they don't have sex with people who could cause a baby to happen. It's a really kind of twisted relationship, but once again, it feels like it goes right along with the manga themes we're getting here. So a long time ago, apparently, Kurapan and her husband did have a son who was an immortal, but he was taken from them in a storm. It was a very dramatic, sad thing. And now Kurapan shows up to the next, after Denise, she shows up to the next person who she's supposed to remove the nectar of eternity or whatever, eternal blossom of eternal flower. But it turns out the boy who she's supposed to do this to is her son, who she thought was dead years and years ago. She's convinced that it's him, even though he has a different name and has a new mother. So when it comes down to it, she can't bring herself to remove his immortality, and now there are 8 immortals. So we'll see kind of what that means going forward. Is there actually a reason for that, or is there just some godly figure who just doesn't want it? But in any case, I really like the art style of the 8th Immortal. The story is unique. It is so along the lines of manga stories. I'm really excited to see if it continues like that going forward. I hope so, and I also am excited to see kind of the dynamic between Kuripan and the other immortals as she ends up having this 8th immortal son that she let live. I imagine she'll have to die. That may seem dark, but she'll probably end up dying because she's did this horrible thing that she wasn't supposed to do. And they keep saying stuff about death must have life and life must have death. The dialogue itself is it's a little bit off. I can't really pinpoint why. I want to look into it and see if it is possibly translated into English from another language, which would make a lot of sense based on the terminology just not quite making sense all the time. Why use this term when another one would have made more sense, you know? And that really wraps up everything that I wanted to talk about for comics that came out this week. That was the week of the 25th and the 26th. Oh god, that's not right, is it? The week of the 26th and the 27th of January. Next week, we have some really good stuff coming out as well. A bunch of number 1s, actually, I'm really excited for. Deep Beyond, Fear Case, Luna, and Sonya Versal are all number 1s in, I guess, ongoing series. They're all indie number 1s too, so this is no Cape Comics. The closest thing you're gonna get to that is Sonya Versal, which is really awesome because that is gonna be Red Sonja multiverse. You know how they did Spider-Verse? Well, this is the Sonya-verse. How cool is that? So we're gonna see all different kinds of Sonyas from different parts of the universe and different places, and it's gonna be probably stupid, but I don't care. It's awesome. Luna is a really, Maria Lovett, I had to think for a second. Maria Lovett is a creator of Luna. She writes and draws it. And then Deep Beyond, I know, has Mirko Andolfo as one of the co-writers. I'll have to look into that more when I do my Monday podcast about this coming week's polls. Other things that I'll be talking about then will be the Vampirella Valentine's special, King Black Marauders #1, Return of the Valkyries #2, Future State Wonder Woman #2, there's a really cool one to look forward to, Future State The Next Batman #3, X Factor #7, Hellions #9, and Far Sector #10. They're wrapping that one up. They've got 2 more issues. It's still not going to be done till mid-2021, but it's worth the wait. And I'll be talking a lot more in depth about those on my podcast that will come out on Monday, the 1st of February. Look at that, we're already into February. My socials here are, I have Instagram at Anna with the Comics. My name is Anna. My website is www.sensationalshegeek.weebly.com because I don't put any money into this yet. And my Twitter is at Savage She-Geek because Sensational She-Geek was too many letters. I also have several other podcast episodes that you can check out if you're interested. And as I keep saying, Monday I'll be putting out another podcast that'll be talking more about comics in the coming week, as well as spotlights on representation in those comics. So if you've made it far, once again, as usual, thank you so much for listening this far into it. I'm glad to have you here. And if you have anything you'd like to add, go ahead and give me a comment, send me some kind of message, let me know what you have to say. And thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next time, and have a great rest of your weekend.